Suicide can be regarded in various lights. It might be held to be reprehensible, permissible, or even heroic. In the first place, it looks like suicide can be allowed and tolerated. Its advocates argue that so long as he does not violate the rights of others, a man is a free agent. With regard to his body, there are various things he can properly do. He can have an abscess lanced or a limb amputated and disregard a scar. He is, in fact, free to do whatever he may consider useful and advisable. Think of it this way. Nobody questions a person's right to undergo a risky surgery, or to choose a dangerous profession, or even to eat themselves into an early grave. We generally accept that people have broad authority over what happens to their own bodies. If he comes to the conclusion that the most useful and advisable thing he can do is to put an end to his life, why should he not be entitled to do so? Why not if he sees that he can no longer go on living and that he will be ridding himself of calamity, torment, and disgrace? To be sure, he robs himself of a full life, but he escapes once and for all from misfortune. The argument sounds most plausible, and honestly, stated that baldly, it is hard to immediately see what is wrong with it. But let us, leaving aside religious considerations, examine the act itself. We may treat our body as we please, provided our motives are those of self-preservation. A man might have his foot amputated, for instance, insofar as it impedes him in life. The key word there is self-preservation. Every legitimate use of the body, surgery, risk-taking, even extreme self-denial, is ultimately in service of keeping the person going, keeping them functioning, keeping them in the game. To preserve his mind, he has the right of disposal over his body. But in taking his life, he does not preserve his mind. He disposes of his mind and not of its attendant circumstances. He robs himself of his mind itself. Here is the crucial point. You cannot solve your problems by eliminating the one who has them. The person who destroys himself has not escaped his circumstances. He has destroyed the very subject to whom circumstances matter in the first place. This is contrary to the highest duty we have towards ourselves, for it annuls the condition of all other duties. It goes beyond the limits of the use of free will, for this use is possible only through the existence of one's mind. Free will, in other words, is not a blank check you can cash in to cancel your own existence, because the moment you do, the account itself ceases to exist.
There is another set of considerations which make suicide seem plausible. Namely, when a man finds himself so placed that he can continue living only under circumstances which deprive life of all value, in which he can no longer live conformably to virtue and prudence, so that he must, from noble motives, put an end to his life. This is the harder case, and it deserves to be taken seriously rather than dismissed. Those who defend suicide from this angle cite the example of Cato, a Roman Stoic who was regarded as the great champion of republican freedom. He opposed Caesar and followed Pompey in the struggle to preserve the Roman Republic, but he killed himself after his cause was defeated at the Battle of Thapsus. Cato knew that the entire Roman nation relied upon him in their resistance to Caesar, but he found that he could not prevent himself from falling into Caesar's hands. If he, the champion of freedom, submitted, everyone would say, if Cato himself submits, what else can we do? And just like that, the spirit of resistance would collapse. If, on the other hand, he killed himself, his death might spur the Romans on to fight to the bitter end in defense of their freedom. His death would be a statement, a rallying cry, a final act of defiance. He thought that it was necessary for him to die, that if he could not go on living as Cato, he could not go on living at all.
It must certainly be admitted that in a case such as this, where suicide is a virtue, appearances are in its favor.
The argument is genuinely compelling, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But this is the only example which has given the world the opportunity of defending suicide, and there has been no similar case since. It is, in other words, an extreme outlier, the one scenario in all of recorded history where the case for suicide comes closest to being persuasive. We might also consider the case of Lucretia, a Roman noblewoman who killed herself after being raped by a son of the king. She did so from decency and a fury of vengeance. Her case is frequently cited alongside Cato's as another instance where suicide seems defensible, even admirable. It is obviously our duty to preserve our honor, particularly in relation to the opposite sex, but we must endeavor to save our honor only to this extent that we ought not to surrender it for selfish and lustful purposes. What was done to Lucretia was a monstrous wrong, and her rage was entirely understandable, but the response was misdirected. It would have been better had she defended her honor unto death, fighting back with everything she had, even at the cost of her life, for that would not have been suicide and would have been right. There is a real and important difference here. It is no suicide to risk one's life against one's enemies, and even to sacrifice it, in order to observe one's duties toward oneself. The soldier who dies charging the enemy is not a suicide. The person who dies resisting an attacker is not a suicide. The act of self-destruction and the act of self-sacrifice in defense of something are simply not the same thing.
No one under the sun can bind me to commit suicide. No sovereign can do so. A ruler can demand a great deal from his subjects, their labor, their taxes, their obedience, even their willingness to face death in battle. But he cannot demand that they take their own lives, because that crosses a line that no external authority has the right to cross. The sovereign can call upon his subjects to fight to the death for their country, and those who fall on the field of battle are not suicides, but the victims of fate. There is a world of difference between being killed by the enemy and killing yourself. And on the other side, a faint heart and fear of the death which fate inevitably threatens us with is no true self-preservation either. The soldier who breaks ranks and runs to save his own skin, leaving his comrades to die, has not preserved himself in any meaningful sense. He has just preserved his body at the cost of everything that made it worth preserving. He who runs away to save his own life and leaves his comrades in the lurch is a coward. But he who defends himself and his fellows, even unto death, is no suicide, but noble and high-minded. For life is not to be highly regarded for its own sake, and I should endeavor to preserve my own life only so far as I am worthy to live.